I wouldn't be surprised if you gave this game a rating 8 out of 10. For many people it falls down even more to around 6 out of 10. And yeah, I'm in the latter group. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. I compiled few major points that stood out to me about this game, and you might find out what this game might do for you. The thing that surprised me the most were the zones. Basically the environment is most of the time stunning. Sometimes I would even stop playing the game to admire how everything looks. And what's even better, there's even a great variety of these places. And sometimes even the environment changes throughout the story. RIP! I got the fish on my face. One thing that also stands out in this game is the movement. Basically the way you can traverse the environment. The jumping, running, walking, vaulting over stuff feels extremely smooth and makes the game overall very fun to move in. And now for the main part, the gameplay of the looter shooter. If you played the previous titles, you get what you expect, with some significant changes. The first thing I have noticed was the different drop rate of the legendary and higher quality guns. As I was playing through Borderlands 3 last year, I noticed that the high tier guns, like legendary guns, were dropping extremely often, to the point where getting a legendary was not exciting enough. For some reason, here in this shop, I can get a legendary weapon. The Flood. Okay. In Wonderlands, in my first playthrough, it took nearly 7 hours to get the first one. 7 hours of playtime, first legendary. I'm actually excited. What do you do? Ooh, laser gun. Okay, I must say, after 7 hours getting the legendary, I feel quite excited. Of course, later in the game, you increase your loot luck by collecting one of these. Gotcha. The very first thing I have noticed that the combat was really fun, but sadly one of my worries came to fruition. The skeletons are not as fun to shoot at as the psychos. The explosion of the meat is more entertaining. We were blowing heads up, pieces flying everywhere. Damn, this is awesome. And this is what Borderlands games brings to the table, and I already fell in love with it again. The meat and bone explosions are more fun. If you take away the meat, it's just bones. Where's the meat explosion? Come on, dude. That's just a bone explosion. Some people won't mind this. The only thing that comes to my mind, what the hell is wrong with you? It's a looter shooter. At this stage the loot felt good. Could be better, but the shooter part is missing something. For the shooting part to be excellent, you have to feel the impact of the gun, which is bloody lacking. Like, look at this. Like, in my opinion, skeletons are really unfun to shoot at. But they even messed up the humans. Even the people have like the blue explosions. I want meat explosions. And I heard the argument that, oh, it's in Tina's imagination, so there's no need for blood. But for me, it drastically decreases the enjoyment of shooting something. For Borderlands to keep being enjoying in the future, it has to innovate on the core principles. Borderlands 3 was alright. The impact should have been stepped up, like limbs falling out and stuff like that. Here, it's not only the same, it went back. And for me, the game nearly lost 2 points here, but we will keep it at 1. I just noticed one thing, boys and girls. The person, which isn't enemy NPC, splatters. Oh, upsetting. One more interesting thing to take notice of. There are new Mele weapons. Pretty cool. Big variety. But I noticed that during my playthrough, they were doing no damage at all. What is up with that? Look at the damage of the weapon. And the funny part is the only melee weapon that was actually good was one that buffed my spell damage. Which gets me to another interesting stuff. They actually replace grenades with spells. And these spells are actually pretty cool. That's a cool spell. They have various effects that synergize with different builds and makes it very interesting. And unlike melee weapons, they actually do damage. And in terms of skills, you actually have only one skill tree per character. But that's not the end of the world, because you actually can get a secondary class and match these together. But sadly, I think I still prefer the older skill trees. But I'm not 100% sure, because I haven't really went into the end game. But during leveling, I prefer the older skill trees. increase. But as well as when you level, you get one attribute point that you can assign, increasing your critical damage, critical chance, spell damage, and this kind of stuff.
He drew the skeleton man, his song of woe heard cross the sands. One day when our penance is done, we'll take our chance and go.
The story is also surprising. It was more interesting than the Borderlands 3 one. The villain is alright, the voice acting on characters is stellar. However, of course, there was one thing I didn't enjoy about it. It felt like it doesn't really matter, because it is basically a D&D game, so it loses somewhat of a seriousness. It had a lot of comedy, and some of it actually hit. I think it clearly lacked some more serious content. Sometimes it tried it, and I enjoyed it, like in these moments.
So you're gonna stay?
But at the end, it felt unimportant, which is quite sad. And now for the, in my opinion, the biggest problem of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. And the problem is that there's already too many Borderlands games. The first one came out in 2009. I'm right now 25 years old. Back then, I was 12. This game, as basically any other, would be much more awesome if I was again 12 years old. Not saying I have to be small kid to enjoy these kind of games, but I have played already so many Borderlands titles. It has been the same game for 13 years. And once innovative, cool idea, so many weapons, is more of a norm. Which is not problem with the game, but more problem with me and probably you. This game actually innovates on a bunch of stuff. The running and vaulting, jumping feels amazing. The maps, the environment is beautiful. They even changed grenades to spells, but that's like neutral because I like the grenades as well. But where the problem is, the shooting part didn't really improve. If it wants to be more successful in the future, it has to step up the loot and most importantly, the shooting and the feedback of the guns. Basic enemies need to be more fun to shoot at, while the bosses need to have more mechanics, because the encounters now are only hard because they are bullet sponges, not because they have interesting mechanics. If you haven't played Borderlands games, this is surely 8 out of 10. For 12-year-old me, 9 or even 10. But games are overall getting better, and Borderlands has to keep up. But for me, and maybe even for you if you played previous Borderlands titles, it really doesn't have what it takes to keep me interested. So it drops to 7, and I would say even 6, so an above average game. But most importantly, you can tell me in the comments below what you think about this. In my opinion, they just have to step their game up, mainly in the core gameplay mechanics, because this is not 13 years ago, and we have just so many amazing games, and they feel more worth spending their time in. Take care. Look at the reload on this. What?
He drew the skeleton man, his song of woe heard cross the sands. One day when my penance is done, I'll take my chance and go.